Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hi, and welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I am so looking forward today to talk with Andrew Nance. Andrew, hello. Welcome to the show.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And you and I were just saying how we've been connected through social media for such a long time. I don't even know where it began, but it's so wonderful to have people in the field that I get to see your work and watch it grow, and not to feel like I'm meeting you in person. Even though we're still virtual, it feels like a more personal introduction. So I'm really happy to get to know you better today.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's so cool to have this venue.
Yes. So introduce yourself. Tell our listeners what it is you do and the work that you're doing. And I just want to delve into that. So go ahead and share your awesomeness.
Thank you. Okay, I'll try. So I started an organization called Mindful Arts San Francisco. And we bring volunteers into the schools to teach the principles of mindfulness using theater, storytelling, and art activities. This year, we're going to hopefully place about 40 volunteers into schools all over San Francisco. And it's grown crazily in the last 5 years. It was just me initially, and now we've got 40 volunteers.
Wow.
All these schools. Yeah, it's really neat. And then I also write books on mindfulness, some for kids and then some for adults, teachers and parents and social.
You and I have a lot in common, so I'm really excited to keep talking. So I was trained in mindful schools. I started my practice. I'm a therapist, but when I was getting my intern hours, I was a school counselor. And what I really did was mindfulness in the classroom for 4 years.
Oh, nice.
With a pre-K through 8th grade. And the value of teaching kids these tools, and people would always say, oh, they're not going to get it. They don't get it. It's too, higher level for them. They're not going to be able to sit still. And I know in my experience, as soon as I walked in the room, it was, yay, Miss Jory's here. And it was, amazing, the progression of seeing their ability for stillness and presence.
Yes. Yeah.
So I love that you're doing this through the creative arts. How did you, I guess a couple of questions I'm really curious about is, what was your connection to mindfulness? Like, when did you really begin to practice? And then how did you make that jump from using the creative arts, like theater and art, as a modality for mindfulness with kids? It's just beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so I have a degree in theater from NYU and New York University, and I became a conservatory director for 18 years almost. I was a conservatory director. Yeah, we started with, I want to say like 5 classes a year, and it wound up being like 40 classes a year or something ridiculous. We were working in pre-K, we were, up to basically adults, grandparents and everything else. And so I did that for 18 years and I loved it. I got to do all sorts of shows as an actor. I produced a lot of shows. I selected a lot of shows. I taught theater. Mostly when people needed a substitute teacher, I would step in. I didn't have my own classes for a long time. In the beginning, years ago, in my 20s, I had my own classes. Mm-hmm. But anyway, after my mom died, I just thought, gosh, this has been such a great chapter of my life. And I love this place. It's called New Conservatory Theater Center. It's in San Francisco, and just can't speak highly enough of it. Mm. I just felt like I needed one more chapter,
Yeah.
I was probably, how old was I? I was in my late 40s at the time, and I just wanted to do something else. So, I went to my boss crying basically and said, I just feel like it's time to leave, and he actually said no the first time. And then I said, okay, you're right. I'm emotional. My mom just passed. let me give it another 6 months. And so 6 months later, I still felt in my heart that I needed to do something.
There was something more. It sounds like you needed to give back in a different way.
Yeah. And so I, took some classes. One of them was the Science of Well-Being, which I just love the name of that. And it could have led me down a road of being a life coach, because that sort of interested me. But it talked about mindfulness a little bit, but just different ways to have a fulfilling life. So I liked it, took a couple of classes at San Francisco State in that realm. And then I heard about the Greater Good Science Center. Have you heard about that? Yeah.
Absolutely. Get their emails. Yes. They're a bunch of workshops that they've held. Yeah, they're fabulous out in Berkeley.
Oh yeah, excellent. So they have this teacher symposium. So every year they have a symposium that lasts a week, and you go there and you learn about social emotional learning and how you can bring it into your classrooms. And I think now they actually have 2 weeks a year.
Wow.
2 separate weeks a year. So I went to one, and that's when I really started hearing about mindfulness and people from mindful schools. Megan and her husband or partner.
Yeah, that's where I did my training, was with mindful schools.
Perfect.
So yeah.
Perfect. I love it. So so they were there, and they started playing games with us. Like they blindfolded someone, and we would walk towards them, and you would point to whoever you thought was closer. And you could actually sense when someone was getting nearer to you just by tuning in. So it was really interesting. And I thought, well, this is like the theater games that I played in high school and college, things I brought into rehearsals as a director. And so this light bulb went off, and I just sort of had this Rolodex going in my head of all the theater games I played. And I thought I could play this and this and this. So I signed up immediately and took some mindful schools classes. I think I've taken about 3 or 4. I have to look up that. And then would go to Spirit Rock Meditation Center.
Oh, I love Spirit Rock.
Oh my gosh. I go there weekly, actually. They have a Sangha there on Wednesday mornings from 10 to 12. Just love it. It's just a great way to check in. I find going to some sort of weekly practice is a really good idea. It just kind of allows you to lean in. Do you do anything like that?
I lead weekly meditations.
Oh my God.
It's one of my favorite part of my work week. And it's actually interesting. I've had people who don't live in my area say, are you ever gonna live stream your meditations?
Right.
And I really get torn. Just, it's interesting because it's different when you're in the same room, but yet at the same time, I want to provide the offering to anybody. So maybe one day I'll practice live streaming a meditation class, but it's truly one of my favorite parts of the week. And I always say to people who show up, really thank you for being here, because it's really serving my needs. Yeah. Like it's very self-serving that I'm teaching this.
Yeah.
Because this is what I need in my week. And I really honor you guys for showing up and sharing this space with me and creating this community around these tools that we all value and we so desperately need.
Yeah. Where is this?
My practice is out in Danville.
Okay. All right. So is it in your office?
It's in my office. Yeah. I have a beautiful office space that I manifested, and I have my room where I see my clients. And then I've got a whole big room that I can fit about 14 people with meditation cushions in a circle. So it's beautiful. And, I find that the same people keep coming back, and I'm trying to expand my community with it. But at the same time, I almost don't have enough room to expand the community. Eventually, I envision, so my office is the Bay Area Mindfulness and Therapy Center. And I named it aptly because when I opened it years ago, it's just me and my private practice and my mindfulness and meditation workshops. But I have a vision of expanding it one day and actually having it be a full center for mindful well-being. And I really believe one day I want to have, schedules of meditations like you would a yoga studio.
well, those exist, in LA and New York.
They do. And I need to get them into the suburbs, because that's a thing. And I'm curious what you find too. We can get back to what we were saying, but there are these hubs around the country where this mindful awareness is really strong.
Yeah.
And it centers around those already existing spiritual communities, more or less. And one of my missions is, how do I get these tools to the people who might not be inclined to go to Spirit Rock, who might not sign up to go to the Greater Good or go to Wisdom 2.0 conference? Because what I see, I live in upper middle class suburbia, and for many years I was a stay-at-home mom, and believe me, everyone I see is stressed and overwhelmed and anxious and unhappy. And I believe mindfulness is the answer. I really do. I always say, whether you're sitting in traffic or dealing with cancer, the tools are the same.
That's right.
And it's how you're taking it moment by moment, breath by breath, getting out of your head, into your body, stop the rumination, stop the fear of the future, be present and breathe and allow and accept and trust and let go and non-attachment. It's all the same. And yet I am very intentionally creating this intention to, how do I get the people who may not be inclined to step through my doors?
Yeah.
Because there's still a little bit of, maybe a consideration, that's woo-woo, or I'm not the type who meditates, or here's what I get all the time of, I don't have time to be mindful.
Right, yes.
I'm like, well, you've got time to be angry and reactive. It's no extra time to be mindful. It's just a different intention.
That's so funny. Yeah, I hear I can't meditate. I can't stop the voices in my head. And I'm like, well, there you go, because that's the first problem.
Yes.
Is you're actually not stopping the voices in your head. You're just being the witness,
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I will often do is, debunk those myths of meditation.
Yeah.
Because I find so many people come to it with an expectation or an attachment to the outcome,
yes,
or a belief that they'll feel calm and peaceful and zen-like, or that the thoughts will stop. And when they realize that that's not the purpose,
right,
then they've already shot themselves in the foot. And I think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for their unhappiness, for their stress.
That's right.
And, mindfulness has no agenda on who it can work for or not.
Yeah, that's right. And I feel like there's such a desire to be perfect, by so many, especially people, I think, who move to the big cities. There's this ego that kind of drives you to get to a big city. And then, when you're not perfect at something, you shun it away. It makes you uncomfortable, and you kind of numb and run.
Yeah, I always say, it's a practice. And just like you would say, I have a yoga practice, you never say I have a yoga perfect.
Right. Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It's a mindfulness practice. Like, we miss the mark all the time. And yet if we have compassion and awareness, we say, okay, so I missed the mark. Let me try again. This moment's a new opportunity.
That's right. That's right.
And, you mentioned this, need to be perfect. I think part of it too is people have a real fear of slowing down. I find especially women who are overwhelmed in their parenting and unhappy in their relationships, I think are afraid to slow down for what they might uncover when they sit with what is.
Well, and men too. I mean, my gosh, we don't even know what to do with vulnerability, Yeah,
Yeah, my fiance is trying to change the world on that. He works with men. His podcast is called The Evolved Caveman.
Wow.
And he is really trying to give men the tools to evolve, to become emotionally aware. And he teaches a lot about the man box culture around the way men are socialized to not feel.
Right.
And how that might have served them in career to some extent.
Right, or the military.
Right, exactly. But it really has done a disservice for relationships. And so he and I are combining our efforts, and we're leading a couples retreat in September, because like you said, I work mostly with women, so I see what the women are really stuck with.
Right.
And the men are dealing with a whole different pot that they are, grappling with. What does it look like to be a modern man with emotional awareness that women are demanding more of their men than ever?
That's really true. You know, my husband actually volunteers up at San Quentin, and he
Wow.
does restorative justice circles with these guys. And they bring in, I think, 12 to 14 guys, and they're interviewed. So there's a little bit of self-selection happening, but they go through a 2-year-long program of looking at their crime, what led to their crime, and their emotional landscape.
Wow.
Yeah, and so here's the thing. There's a 65, I think the word is recidivism rate, return rate to prison. Normally, 65% return rate. If you take this program, there is a less than 2% return rate to prison.
Wow.
And that's just because these guys are starting to understand what got them there in the first place. And it's really powerful.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they actually played a game that I played, you know, in college, or you might have played it at a party. And it's basically just called, "What are you feeling?" And there's a bunch of emotions in a bag. Actually, I have it right here. So you have this bag right here, and you just reach in and you pull out a word like kind. All right. Or let me see, what's another emotion that I like? Mindful. So you could, or let's say it's anger. So if it's anger, it's the one that I feel like people can connect with the most. Is, you know, I'll ask you, when you're angry, do you feel hot or cold?
Hot.
Yeah, exactly. 100% of the people would say that. If you're angry, is your heart beating fast or slow?
Definitely fast.
Right. When you're angry, are you tense or relaxed?
Oh, very tense.
Exactly. This is an interesting one. This will be curious to see what you say. When you're angry, like, I don't know. I'm trying to give you an example, but you just think of something. When you're angry, do you feel big or little?
That's a really interesting one.
Yeah.
So I would say the old me
Right.
would have felt very little.
Yes, that's so interesting.
The me I'm cultivating and giving space for it is working on getting bigger.
That is so cool that you say that, because I have asked more women that, and so many of them say little. And every kid I ask says big. Even girls, little girl. Yeah, even girls. I don't think I've had one girl say that she feels little when she's angry. But I've asked women that, and it totally makes sense, because history tells you that if you get angry, you might get retaliated against, right? So, you know, if you get angry at someone on the street for bugging you, you might get hurt, you know? So women have to kind of pull in and deal with this anger on their own, whereas men and little kids just can have the luxury or the privilege.
It is a luxury and a privilege,
of saying, you know, get out of here, you know, or leave me alone, or whatever.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if you know of this work, and I forget who did the study with men, but I know the one with the women. But studies say that under age 5, boys and girls have the same emotional expression. By age 5, it starts to get shut down for boys.
Yeah.
You know, of telling them, don't cry like a girl, don't be a baby, big boys don't cry, man up, soldier up, like whatever the phrases are.
Yeah.
And so it cuts off 2/3 of their emotional spectrum.
Yeah.
And what they're left with is anger, stress, and lust. And they grow up knowing, if they've paid attention to those social cues, I'll be ridiculed for showing too much happiness, joy, and excitement, or sadness, or longing, or embarrassment, right? So they learn very quickly. That happens for boys by age 4 and 5. For girls, this is the work of Carol Gilligan, I think back in the 70s or 80s. And what she discovered was that for girls, that gets shut down by age 12, because what they're being socialized is to be a nice girl.
Right. Yeah.
And so in her studies, the girls in her studies would respond to her by saying, do you want to know how I feel? or do you want to know how I really feel?
Wow.
I can't tell you how I really feel because then I won't be a nice girl.
Right.
So this is where we're being socialized to hold that anger in because it's not polite, it's not ladylike.
That's right.
So we censor our emotions for what's socially acceptable.
Yeah. Oh, so interesting.
And do you remember the movie Enchanted? Did you ever see that kids movie?
Yeah.
There's this amazing scene that I always think about, but I never have actually done. I want to keep it just like in my Safari file, like on my phone, so I could pull it up at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
But there's this scene where Amy Adams gets angry for the first time. And she almost like, you see her like looking down at her body as if like being curious, like what's bubbling up inside of her. And she goes, what's this? And then like she discovers it's anger. And she goes, I'm angry. And then she's so excited. She yells, I'm angry.
I love it.
And I see this with women and my clients because they need permission to feel all these emotions. So now what we do with it,
right, that's
a second question, right? But just the permission to feel it. And that scene with Amy Adams is brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Go look up that scene.
I love that. That's fantastic. Because that's what I say to the kids. You know, your body is always sending you information. You know, 24/7, your body is having an emotional experience. We just like to think, what's the expression? That we're thinkers that sometimes feel, rather than,
feelers that sometimes think. John and I that's my fiance. We just led a workshop last week, a couples workshop. And this theme came up over and over again, that we think that we're thinking beings that feel. Right. When in reality, we're being things that think. Or we're feeling beings that think.
That's right. Yeah. It's fascinating. And so when we're feeling comfortable, there are no signals being sent to the brain to fix this, right? Fix this comfortability. That doesn't really happen, right? We're like, everything's good. Don't change.
Don't move. Don't touch. I'm not like batting an eyelash. I don't want this comfort to go away.
Right, exactly. But when we're uncomfortable, I mean, think about it. When you have a cold, you sneeze. When you have a cough, you cough. When you're have a fever, you sweat. You expel things from the body. When you're angry, you expel that anger. Everything needs to get out. And so the body sends this information to the brain, and often we're held hostage by the body's uncomfortability. And with mindfulness, we lean into it, right? We're like, oh, look what's showing up. And you take that breath and you notice, oh, there's all this tension and tingling right here in my shoulders because I'm angry. And my fists are clenched and my jaw, and I'm not breathing, and you do this inventory, and you can do that in a nanosecond. And just by doing that inventory, we can be more skillful with what we do next. And of course it's a practice, and of course we fail at it. But what is the failure is not success is not the absence of failure, but it's part of it, You just have to keep failing in order to get better at something. What I say to the kids, we were talking about perfect or whatever, and I say practice makes progress,
Yes.
And that's the key, is just the willingness to practice so we can progress.
Yeah. And, I have so many accounts of people who have done work with me for years, whether come to my classes, my retreats, my workshops, my meditations, even have come in as clients. And the quote success stories, are so beautiful because, it's when, they'll come in and say, oh my God, I was able to have equanimity today. Like I was able to not get caught up in the reactivity of my kids or my husband or the traffic. Like, wow, how amazing to be able to choose a different response.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, that idea of equanimity is such a powerful one. And people who haven't been taught it in the proper way, I will say it that way, because I learned mindfulness for years and still felt like it was a really esoteric practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to be able to teach it in a way that was really tangible. Like, okay, I get that. I can do that.
Right.
Versus, just breathe and be present, because that all sounds great. But what does that mean? And, from moment to moment.
Right.
But to be able to have that equanimity, people can easily assume it's just be a zombie, not respond, not react, not feel. No, it's actually such deep wisdom to feel all of it.
Right.
And not let it take over,
right.
and not let it be reactive, and having the intention to be responsive and realizing how I manage whatever's coming up as a choice.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think of the body as like the child, and the mind or the brain is like the wise parent. And if we can notice that the child is wanting attention, screaming, crying, whatever, and if we can just say, oh, it's okay, I got you, we can do this together, then we're gonna get somewhere. But if we're always saying to the child, shut up, or go away, or stop this, you're being childlike,
after the California wildfires back in October were kind of, sweeping the state, I did a handful of social media posts that led to some big media placements. And one of them was I went down to KTLA in Los Angeles and was on the morning news of what I called disaster anxiety, because I think it's so common. And while I, was focusing on the wildfires, what it really was about was to give parents language to give room for these kids' fears to be real and exist.
Beautiful.
Because there's so many times, and I'm sure you see this, where people dismiss kids' feelings. Oh, it's going to be fine. Don't worry. Right. Oh, my favorite, calm down.
Yes.
Right? And I laugh because like the very last thing a kid's ever going to do when you say to calm down is actually calm down.
Right. And what does that even mean to, a 4 or 5-year-old? Like,
it means I'm irritating my parent and they want me to shut up.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. It means be quiet, basically.
Yeah. But, it feels really counterintuitive to say to a child, yeah, that's a really scary thought. I could see why that would be worrisome right now. Right. Yeah, I get worried sometimes too. That's perfectly normal. Here, come let me give you a hug.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll say that to a kid. Like if I see a kid in the hallway, because I teach about 17 classes a week now.
Wow.
I know. I basically teach a whole school out in the Bayview district of San Francisco. And I'll see a kid in the hallway and they'll obviously having a big emotion. And I'll do that kind of body scan I was doing with you. And I'll say, oh, it looks like you're having a big emotion. Do you feel hot or cold? And they'll say hot. And do you feel tense or relaxed? And I'll start like praising them. That's great. Good for you. And then eventually I'll say, do you think you can wiggle your toes? Because if they can wiggle their toes, they've got to use their prefrontal cortex a little bit.
Yes.
And so they do that. And I'm like, wow, that's some pretty good wiggling. And then they get a little smile on their face. And I'll say, you want to try to take a breath? And I'll say, what's your favorite breath? And we have different ways to breathe at the school, like Spidey breathing or coyote breathing or ball breath, whatever. And so they'll choose, which is another way to activate their prefrontal cortex. And then we'll breathe together. And it's just this great way for them to, for me to validate what they're going through rather than saying, okay, tell me what happened. Oh, someone took your ball. Well, you're going to get it tomorrow. No big deal. It's just
so dismissive.
It is. I mean, you'd never say that to a friend.
No, it doesn't give room for any of what they're feeling to be real.
I know. I always like to say, we're making these kids feel a little bit crazy, And at 5 years old, you're making that child feel crazy. It's really, just shocking. That
One of my oldest stories, this was actually someone I knew, and the daughter had a lot of anxiety. And one day the daughter said, my back hurts. And the mom goes, oh no, honey, you're fine.
Wow.
And I remember looking at the girl's face and it looked like she had pain.
Yeah.
And then it went to confusion.
Right.
And then she shrugged and walked out of the room. And I remember at the point, my blood just boiling, because here's a kid with anxiety, and she just expressed how she felt in her body. So her physiology was giving her some clue of something.
Yeah.
And the mom said, you look fine, so you must be fine.
Right.
No wonder she's anxious.
I don't have time to add, we can't add this back problem to my list.
And she turned to me and said, she fell at, sports the other day.
Yeah.
And so there was an actual potential reason why there was pain. But
Yeah.
rather than having curiosity, tell me more. Where does it hurt? Was it worse than yesterday? Do we need to go to the doctor? Do you need Advil? Do you need ice? Do you need a hug? Do you need,
Right.
being curious?
Right.
And I just, in that moment, had that thought of, I think kids' anxieties increase when there's a disparity between what they're feeling and what they're told they're feeling, because they're supposed to trust their parent.
Right.
And if their parent is saying, oh, no, that's not really what's going on, they learn to not trust themselves.
Right. Yeah.
And this transfers into bigger issues like, clients who are on the verge of divorce and their kids are sensing something is going on in the marriage, but they're not ready to tell the kids. And when the kids ask, the parent says, oh, no, everything's fine. But everything in that child's physiology and intuition tells them it's not fine.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So now we're doing a disservice of now teaching our kids to not believe their greatest wisdom, which is their bodies.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I know this. Just last week, this 4-year-old, he's throwing chairs and I guess he wet himself, which he hadn't been doing. And, and the teacher, bless her heart, was actually sympathetic, but you could see her frustration on her face. Like he wasn't sort of towing the line of transitional kindergarten,
Right.
And I'm just like, and I said, gosh, there's probably something going on at home. And she said, well, I asked and they're not saying anything, but it's that curiosity you're talking about. Well, we need to go a little bit more, or at least have compassion for this kid and just say, he is not trying to ruin my day. And
he's not doing it on purpose.
Exactly. I know. And yet, I think these teachers sometimes, get into the business of teaching because it makes them feel so good to see those little, faces. And yet they also have to do that deep work too of, really being their loving parent. And, I finally this year have starting telling groups of kids that I love them because I don't say it one-on-one. I think that's a little weird, but I say it to the group, as I'm leaving. Love you guys. See you next week. And because if that's our job as adults is to make kids feel loved and safe, then we need to say that to them, that I love you, because otherwise I don't think they intuitively get it in a classroom, of 20 kids or 25 kids.
I love that you're being so vulnerable and doing that, Andrew. Really, it's a courageous act to express how you really feel about someone.
Right.
And for some of these kids, we may not know what their home lives are, and that could be the only time they're hearing that week.
No, that's what I feel. And, and at first I thought, oh, they were going to laugh or roll their eyes or look at me funny. But they just get, quiet and they like it, I think.
They feel seen.
Yeah, they
feel accepted.
Seen. Right. And I asked some of the other teachers before I did it actually, and they said, you know what? At my last school, at my private school, we didn't say I love you, but at this school, I say it all the time. So it's very validating that they're doing it too, and. Same thing with hugs, there's some district policies around hugs, but again, we're designed to be hugged by an adult in our lives when we're
we're wired for attachment and touch.
Yeah. I mean, how often have you been in a yoga class where they tell you to do that, or in a mindfulness class, give yourself self-care.
I had someone on the podcast a couple months back, and she does, I believe it's work with kids as well, or maybe it's just kind of yoga-based mindfulness practices. But just the way that our brain can't differentiate between a real and perceived threat, right? Just so our brain will go into that same physiological reaction by a thought,
right?
By having some negative thought or overwhelming thought.
Yeah.
She said, and I love this, she said, our brain doesn't know the difference between a hug someone else gives us and a hug that we can give ourselves. That our brain doesn't know the difference of who's touching.
That makes so much sense.
So we can actually give ourselves a hug and activate the same part of our brain
Yeah.
that gets responsive when someone else is hugging us.
I like that. I feel that, actually. I'm trying to remember someone hugging me, and there's like this tingling in the back of my head. Yeah, it's an interesting.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful that we can really become our own source of that, the positive chemical, dump that we get from, that warm, fuzzy feeling inside, like you described, that sensation, that tingling.
Yeah. It's such a valuable gift to know what your body is trying to tell you. Like, I've been with my husband 30 years. And
wow, congratulations on that.
We're very proud of ourselves. But yeah, about 2 years ago, and I've been doing mindfulness for about 6 years, but only about 2 years ago, I started just noticing when someone you've been around for 30 years is doing something annoying. And I just would notice the sensations in the body. And just by noticing it, I was kind of able to rewire what was going on, because I was feeling uncomfortable and wanted to say something, like, stop doing that. I hate when you do that. But instead I would just attend to the body, attend to the child, and take that breath. And suddenly it was no longer annoying. I mean, it's a really, really powerful thing. I highly recommend trying that with those little, sort of micro annoyances that might come up for a partner throughout the day.
So for someone who's listening, because I know exactly what you mean, I've been practicing. I also will be, like, for me, one of the biggest tools is to name my thoughts, and, or name the emotion that comes, like, oh, wow, look at that. I'm thinking about that again, just being that witness of the mind.
Yeah.
But I would do that with emotions, like years ago when I was going through my divorce, and, every strong emotion comes up.
Yeah.
And to be able to just give it room to exist and be like, yeah, this is what sadness feels like.
Right. Yeah.
And just be with the sadness. And this is what anger feels like, and be with the anger. And it's amazing when you're in that witnessing, when you're in that observer mind and just giving it that room, it doesn't hold the same charge.
Fascinating. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I've even tried to not name the emotion. I mean, yes, naming the emotion is really important.
That's assuming you even know what emotion you're feeling.
Exactly. And so sometimes I'll just say heat, tension, rather than, because
what it has to mean.
Right. Because often we go to the story, right? Like anger means, I don't know. Anger
means my partner should know not to do that annoying thing, because I've already asked him a million times.
Exactly. Right. And it takes you kind of down a rabbit hole. Whereas when you start just focusing on the sensations in the body, it's a rabbit hole of where else do I feel uncomfortable? And
it's that curiosity.
Yeah, exactly. And it really, it's Pavlovian in the sense that, like, I remember, I had this aha moment. My dog, which you may hear in a minute, bark at like the mailman or something. I definitely get like this heat reaction when it happens, and I used to get really frustrated at him. Like, why doesn't he just stop barking at the mailman or someone driving by? He can bark quite a bit. And one day I was at someone else's house, and their doorbell rang. They didn't have a dog, but the doorbell was exactly the same sound as my doorbell. And I had the same heat flush. And so I was able to attend to that in my body.
Interesting.
And it changed from now on. I still have the same heat stuff, but I don't have that impulse to yell at the dog or come over here.
And it sounds like you've detached from the story around it.
Yeah, like, gosh, why can't he be, more trained, or why, I'm sure this is my husband's fault, or whatever, whatever the story.
Right. And so much of our reactions, I think, come down to that question of why.
Yeah, right.
Like why this, why now, why me, why, which just puts us in that reactive loop.
Right. And it also can take us back to childhood, which may or may not be helpful. You know, often I feel like we try to be the heroes of our own lives rather than let's just not go there. Let's just not go figure out who's the villain, who's the hero. Let's just attend to us and, and comfort us.
I love that.
Yeah.
Gosh, Andrew, I feel like we could talk for hours, but I do want to ask a couple of specific things. So let's say there's parents who are listening now who have got young kids. I love the way you described some of the favorite things you're doing with kids in the classroom. Any other favorite way that you work with kids that maybe some of that more creative style with that, the theater play or games that can really get them the tools of awareness without feeling like the kids are being overly taught? Because we know as soon as kids realize you're teaching, a moment happens, they're like, oh God, here she goes again.
Yeah. The thing that came to mind is all the breath stuff. Like if kids latch on to a favorite breath, like Spidey breathing or something.
Yeah, could you talk about those? Because you mentioned like 3 different ones. So what are those different breaths?
So, so this is Spidey breathing, and you basically just do that. As you're walking down the hall, as you're in the back seat of your car, if you're going to bed.
So what you're doing with your hands, for those who are just listening, if we're not watching it, so certain fingers are opening and closing.
Yeah, if you Google what Spidey looks like when he's shooting his webbing, it would be like that. So you would just closed hands for what? For, I guess, breathing in. Let's see.
Yeah.
And breathing out. Yeah. Or either way is
whatever
fine.
Feels natural.
Feels comfortable. And then the other one
So it's connecting your hand opening and closing with your inhale and exhale.
That's correct. And then the other one is putting your 2 fingers together. Some kids call it like 2 fish kissing. And then you create this little breathing ball, and you open up your fingers with every breath, and then you close them on the exhale. And you can.
It looks like fish gills going in and out almost.
Yeah, right. They do. Yeah, and you could separate your fingers if you want to make the breathing ball bigger, and then try to get them back together. But I like just keeping my fingers together. And then the other one, which you hear in classrooms a lot, depending on what part of the country you're in, quiet coyote. A lot of times a teacher will stand there with her finger over or their mouth and just wait for silence, and all the kids have to put up their hands like a little dog or a little coyote with their pinky and their pointer finger sticking up. And then what I say though is, let's use this opportunity to take a breath. So breathing out. So you open and close your hand, your thumb and your middle and ring finger, up and down. And just a way for the kids to have some choice or agency over what they want to do with this big emotion. Wiggling your toes is another great way to do a little body scan. Like, in order for us to wiggle our toes, we really have to kind of send energy all through our bodies to connect with it. And we're kind of floating throughout our day. We're so caught up in our thinking that we forget that we even have a body. And
I love that. One of the ones I used to do with kids when I used to have mindfulness for kids classes at my office, they would really like this, was, standing up and very, very, very slowly, like really slowly, raising their arms up.
Ooh.
And then incredibly slowly, like going through mud or like, sticky syrup, putting their arms down. And just seeing the slower you could do it, the better. Right. And they're like, I don't get it. What's this doing for us? Yeah. Well, it's making you realize that you have control over your limbs. They don't have control over you. Yeah. And by practicing that, you said it's that agency. If I can choose to do this now, right, I can choose to do it in class when I'm anxious or when I'm got my ADHD ramping up. Like, we can strengthen that muscle of the brain to realize I've got control over these things versus what it feels like they have control over us. That's right. Yeah. Another game that I play that's it's about training the mind and the body is puppy mind games, where you have
like 4 or 5 kids step up into the front of the room of the class, and they may look at the wall clock, let's say, and I'll say, okay, you're going to stand there for 1 whole minute, and you can breathe and you can blink, but no itching, twitching, or looking at your neighbor or anything like that. And if you do, just notice it and come back to your breath. So we do it, and I've done it with pre-K kids all the way, up through adult. And it's a fun game that they find challenging. And it reminds them that they can be focused whenever they want with practice,
Yeah. It's 2 things that made me think of is one, when I was working at the school I was at, there was this mom who one night took out her phone and was videoing her kids at the dinner table, asking them what mindfulness meant to them.
Yeah.
And this one little girl, she was 5 years old, so precocious, the cutest little thing. She was describing how she could be all wiggly, but if her teacher asked her to get, the language I used to use was get into a mindful body position.
Yep.
And so she would put her hands in her lap, cross her hands, kind of sit more, silently in her body. Yeah. She would say I could go from being wiggly to getting into a mindful body position. Yeah. And then she put her hand up in the face. She goes, if I want. But she recognized it's a choice.
Yeah, it is.
And I love that.
Right. And sometimes wiggly is great, when
it's the right space for it. Yeah.
Like I say I wrote this book called Puppy Mind, and I say to them, we never want to get rid of our puppy minds. I mean, that's that part of our mind that can take us to Disneyland whenever we want, or to the beach, or back to our bed, or watch our favorite TV show or play our favorite video game. But we just want to notice when it's in charge and when it's not in charge, and we do that by using our breath and our mind.
Yeah. I want to share one last of my favorite ones. I feel like we could go back and forth with this for so long, but this is, I feel like we're giving parents tips too, because these are things I know so many parents struggle with. Wiggly, inattentive children, and their irritation of that is only going to increase that wiggliness and inattentiveness, right? It's not going to be what calms it down. But one of my favorite things to do, I did this with my adult clients as well, is having practice around sounds. So I'll have them be mindful and really tune their awareness into the sound that's in the foreground of their mind, right? Maybe like a clock in the room.
Right.
Or maybe the hum of the air conditioning or the heater. There's usually some predominant white noise or sound.
Right.
And, focus all your energy on that sound. Then I'll ask them to switch their attention to some background sound.
Nice. Like
a dog outside, or a plane flying above, or, a lawnmower across the street. Something that they can definitely hear, but it's in the background.
Right.
And I'll see if they can tune into the background sound. And then I'll instruct them to kind of switch their attention between the foreground and the background sound. And they're able to really do it. And it amazes them that when they choose, they can switch this attention of what's in the foreground and the background. And I remind them, you're just strengthening the muscle of your brain to put your attention where you want.
Nice.
And I would instruct parents to have them do that with their kids while laying in bed at night. It was a great way to calm them down for bed by tuning in. Because I know where I live, I'm up against open space.
Right.
And one of my favorite things is I hear the owls.
Oh, wow.
And if I really tune in, there's often a second owl in the distance, and I can hear the call and response.
Oh, my God.
And it just quiets my thoughts because I'm tuning into the sounds.
Oh, my God.
Because when we're being, overwhelmed by our sounds and our thoughts, then it's, I hear a sound. Where'd that car going? Who's in the car? I hear the TV. What are my parents watching? And then we start the chatter.
Right. Yeah. Well, if you really want to try an advanced meditation, I created something. It's on my YouTube channel, and it is a 20-minute meditation that has pleasant sounds and unpleasant sounds.
Oh, wow.
As a practice, because, we've all been meditating and something annoying is heard, like my dog barking or the neighbor's baby or whatever. And it takes us down a little story. And so I thought it would be fun and funny to have all these different sounds as a way to train our minds to stay focused, even when it's
I love it.
pulling us up. Yeah. Because, I don't know, I could go on, but
I could go. I know I have to just say this very quick story, but there was years ago when I was married, my meditation cushion, it was in my home office, and I shared the office with my husband, and he had a big CPU. His computer was like a big CPU unit that he never turned off. So it was early one morning, and I'm sitting meditating, and the sound of his computer was pissing me off. Like the motor was ramping up like it was an airplane about to take off.
Exactly.
And I was getting more irritated and agitated as the second went on.
Yeah.
Rather than just being like, oh, look, there's a computer. Oh, there's that sound. It's just a sound, right? No, I was getting caught up in the whole thing. Yeah. And I was literally getting pissed at the computer and then pissed at him. Like, how dare he ruin my meditation? My ego was really taking over, right? It was all about me in that moment.
Been there.
And in the height of my anger and annoyance at the damn computer, all of a sudden, the room went silent. And I thought, my ego again,
right?
Wow, I'm really powerful. Look at that. I just, with my annoyance and irritation, I turned it off.
Oh, that's
I'm like, now I can have a good meditation, right? Because now the conditions are present.
Right.
And in the very next second, every sound in the house went on. The computer, the printer, the DVR, the microwave, because in that split second was a power outage.
Oh, that's hysterical.
And then I just sat there laughing like, wow, me and my ego sure had a good experience that morning of practicing being with what is.
Yeah. And you remember, that's right, exactly. And that's the point of it. And so far I've only had like 24 hits on this poor video.
Okay, I'm going to bring more traffic to it.
But I have to say, you'll hear me talk in the beginning, and I decided, and you can tell me it's terrible, but I decided to be one of those people who talks like this and is very spiritual. And I thought it would be funny. So I hope you get a giggle listening to me talk in a spiritual fashion.
Well, it's funny because I lead weekly meditations, and people will say they've tried apps and they don't like it because they can't stand the person's voice.
Right, exactly. So I'm going to be that person, but I leaned into it. So I'm hoping people know that it's supposed to be kind of funny.
Well, now they'll know.
Right.
And I just want to finish off by so you wrote your book, Puppy Mind. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So Puppy Mind is about a little boy whose mind wanders like a puppy, and he realizes that it's his job to get it to stay in the present, one kind breath at a time. And then the second book I wrote is Mindful Arts in the Classroom, which has everything we've been talking about, from the games to there's even art activities, there's stories. I think there's, I want to say 14 stories in the book. Yeah, and they're all original. Or they're folk tales that I've adapted. And then The Lion in Me is about anger, and it's all about what we were talking about this little boy who has this, bodily experience when he gets angry, and he realizes when his angry lion starts to roar, he takes a deep breath and counts to 4.
Oh, I love that.
I know. And so, so he starts off really easily angered, and by the end of the story, he notices his anger and then chooses to be skillful with it rather than unskillful with it. So it's not about completely getting rid of it. It's about using it, as an energy source,
Or shifting your relationship to it.
Exactly. So, and then I've got another book coming out in the spring of 2020 called The Barefoot King. And that's a beautiful book, beautifully illustrated, really kind of looks like something an archaeologist might have unearthed in a cave somewhere. And it's really stunning. And it's about a young king who stubs his toe and decides he wants to change the world so no one ever stubs his toe again. But he winds up realizing that he just needs to change his mind rather than change the world. And so it's
beautiful.
a beautiful story. I'm so happy with it. And
I can tell a lot of pride as you talk about it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And then Puppy Mind actually is going to be, I've just written the play version of it that will be touring in the San Francisco schools next year.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, Brent, I love what you're bringing to this creativity.
Thank
like
you.
What's coming to mind for me is just kids through your art, through this practice of this mindful awareness of, I just kept in this vision of like you just bringing this work to them, like handing it over. Like, I don't know, this visual I'm getting
I love it.
is this big offering.
Thank you. Yeah, I really feel
it's
like
such an offering, Andrew. And
thanks.
For those who are just listening, but I'm seeing the passion in your face and the smile you have as you talk about it, and that's where I'm feeling this broadness. Like, it's just, I feel like you're handing it over with your passion and your heart.
Well, that's the point of all this, isn't it? To, teach life skills to these kids, not teach them to obey or anything like that, right? Because know how to obey someone. I mean, that's not a life skill you really want.
No, you really don't. You want them to be able to have critical thought, to know themselves.
Right.
Because sometimes not obeying is the right thing for them to be doing.
Right. I mean, and you don't even want to obey a boss. You want to say, "Hey, boss, this isn't working for me," or I know what would work for everyone, or
right.
Or let me give you my thoughts. Like how can we be skillful when we feel like just being a child,
Just when it's hard to be skillful. Yeah.
Really,
Andrew, I feel like you and I could talk for hours.
I know. This is
one of the reasons I love doing my podcast is it just creates my bigger community of people that I am so proud to share the platform with, who are doing really great work in the world.
Yeah, you sound like you're doing amazing work. And it's also helpful to have these conversations because it helps me articulate to an adult what I'm up to,
Yeah.
It's much simpler with a kid. We don't try to talk too much.
Yeah.
Kids, we want them to experience it for themselves. So
how can people find you? Where can they get your books? I know all these links will be in the show notes as well, but where are you?
Yeah.
How can people find your work?
Yeah. So my books can be purchased anywhere books are sold. The one other thing I do have that I only sell on my website are these mindful breathing cards, and there are different ways to breathe, including Spidey breath, including they're really these amazing.
Oh, those look beautiful.
Yeah, they're really cool. And this one I love is it's a dog meditating. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Well, speaking of, I just got a puppy.
Oh, yes.
And his name is Buddha.
Oh, my God. I love it.
And he embodies his name.
Yes.
He's so present. He's a very calm puppy.
Yeah, that's
He's
fantastic.
A super calm puppy. Yeah. But, so that puppy meditating photo, that's hysterical.
I love it. Yeah. So those are $15 on my website, which is Mindful Arts with an S. sf.org, mindfulartssf.org.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful website. I had a woman do it, Tiffany. Oh gosh, I forgot her last name, but it's on the website. And she just did a lovely job. It's got a resource page actually for parents, so you can watch videos with your kids. There's cartoons on mindfulness.
Fantastic.
Like 30 or 40 different videos that are like 3 to 7 minutes long.
Oh, yeah. Andrew, fantastic. Yeah. Great to have that resource.
Yeah, people will.
And I really love how you're bringing these tools in a really creative, playful, fun way. Because I think the more kids can learn social and emotional awareness in a way that feels fun and interactive, these tools are gonna last a lifetime.
Right. Exactly. And like you were saying, they light up when our volunteers show up because they do equate it with fun. It's that Pavlovian response I was talking about. Yeah. I don't want these kids to ever feel like they're being forced to do this. Mm-hmm. I'd rather have them sit in the corner of the room and draw or read or whatever. And they'll pick it up just by.
It's a cliche to say that with kids, it really is a seed you're watering. You don't know when it's going to grow and blossom, but I think enough exposure and they're going to definitely hold on to it. I mean, I know kids I've worked with for years are still using it. And if nothing else, you're giving them a language.
That's right.
And it's, just the availability to have different words to put to their experience, to even just to say, I'm feeling hot right now, is a way of identifying anger.
Right, exactly.
Right. So it's just, I think we're so used to this very concrete desire for cause and effect of when we know something has, quote, worked.
Right.
But when we can see these very soft skills being very applicable in everyday experiences, it just, the thing that I take away most with some of the kids I've worked with over the years is they have a language to utilize that before was never accessible to them.
That's right. That's right. Humans are the only creature that think that if they just articulate what they're feeling, things will be better, and I think that's dangerous. I think what you're doing with the body, what I'm doing with the body is the next step in this.
I agree.
Because, animals have this whole system in place. They'll shake off a scary situation. Your puppy, when he approaches another dog, when he gets older, maybe, will greet him, he'll stiffen up, and then he'll shake it off once he feels safe. And we don't really do that, I think we should shake like once or twice a day, just shake it off.
I'm going to go do that. And when people tell me that's what I'm like, Andrew told me. Exactly. I'm just shaking. Well, and Taylor Swift, she really shakes it off. So
exactly. And she's right, and
it's
we
true.
Do that, but we don't really, we think of it as sort of a mental activity rather than a physical activity.
Yeah.
Theater people around the world will tell you before they go on stage, they'll jump up and down, they'll shake their shoulders, they'll wiggle their fingers and hands, they'll take a deep breath. And
I love it.
One thing we didn't get into was I really believe that theater training and mindfulness training are quite similar, except theater training does teach you reactivity, whereas mindfulness teaches response.
I love that. Yeah, it's a beautiful way of describing. We're going to have to get together and just keep chatting because I feel like we really could. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for I'm so pleased to be helping spread the word of the work you're doing. I think more of the world needs this. I think especially to give it to the kids is the best way to transform our whole world because their minds haven't been made up yet that I can't do this. And clearly our world is definitely going to need more of it. So you guys go check out Andrew's work with his books and his website. And I'm really looking forward to continuing the conversation with you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. It was great.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.